The emergency room was chaos. "Doctor, we're losing him. Flatline," a nurse shouted, her voice breaking under the weight of panic. Another nurse shoved the crash cart forward. "Clear." The defibrillator pads pressed against his chest. His body jolted violently, then collapsed back onto the table. The man on the stretcher was deathly pale, his skin drenched in sweat. But it was the back of his neck that made even the most seasoned nurses shiver, a grotesque lump swollen to the size of clenched fist. The skin stretched tight, throbbing as though something beneath was alive. "Scalpel now," the surgeon barked, his voice sharp, his hands unsteady despite years of experience. One nurse staggered back, clutching her mask. "Oh my God, it moved." No one answered. The only sounds were the frantic hiss of suction tubes, the clatter of steel instruments, and the desperate shuffle of feet. "Doctor!" His vitals are crashing again. The man's chest fell still. His lips turned blue. For a terrifying moment, the room froze in collective silence, every heartbeat belonging not to him, but to the doctors standing over him. Then the scalpel sliced into the swollen mass. A single cut, and what spilled from inside was so revolting, so unimaginable, that even the hardest nurse in the room staggered back, her face drained of color. The air grew heavy. The team stood frozen, staring at the impossible truth. Because what lay inside that lump was not just flesh, not just blood. It was something else, something that never should have been there. Back and index pointing right, and what doctors found inside left everyone frozen in fear. Back and index pointing right if stories like this captivate you. Tales of resilience, hidden truths, and a human spirit tested to its limits. Make sure you subscribe, drop a like, and stay with us until the end, because what you're about to hear is a journey you'll never forget. The chaos of the emergency room began to quiet, though fear still hung heavy in the air. The man's chest finally rose again after the defibrillator's last desperate jolt. A weak heartbeat flickered across the monitor. The surgeon leaned over him, squinting at the grotesque bulge on the back of his neck. It wasn't just a lump anymore. It looked unnatural. Veins webbed across the surface, dark and swollen, as though feeding whatever lived beneath. "Gimme retractors," he ordered, voice sharp. A nurse handed the gleaming steel tools, her gloved hands shaking. "Doctor, are you sure you want to open it here?" "We don't have a choice," he snapped. "If pressure builds any higher, it could suffocate him." The first incision was made. A thin line of blood trickled down his skin. But instead of simple tissue, the blade hit something hard, something that should not have been there. The surgeon paused, his eyes narrowing. "That feels wrong," another nurse whispered. "Is it a cyst? A tumor?" But the moment the scalpel pressed deeper, the lump twitched. The entire operating team flinched. The patient's body shuddered, as though reacting to the cut. One nurse covered her mouth. It moved. I swear it moved." The surgeon clenched his jaw, forcing himself to continue. The more he cut, the more he realized this wasn't just flesh overgrowth. The texture was strange, part soft, part brittle, almost like bone splintered with cartilage. He slid in a retractor and pulled the wound apart. A foul, metallic odor burst into the room, making several nurses gag. Something glistened in the dim light, buried deep inside. The surgeon froze. Dear God. But before anyone could ask what he saw, the man's heart monitor spiked again. Beep, 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 before plunging back towards silence. The patient was slipping away fast, and what was inside that swelling was only beginning to reveal its nightmarish truth. The heart monitor screamed in wild panic, long, flat beeps echoing like a death sentence. "Doctor, we've lost his pulse again," a nurse shouted, pressing her trembling fingers to the man's wrist. Nothing. The surgeon snapped. "CPR. Now." Hands pumped furiously on the man's chest, ribs cracking under the desperate rhythm. A nurse pushed a syringe into his foreline. Epinephrine, 1 milligram, administered. The man's body jerked as the chest compressions continued, his head rolling lifelessly to the side. The grotesque lump on his neck pulsed faintly, as if mocking their attempts to keep him alive. "Clear." The defibrillator paddles slammed against his chest again. His body arched violently before collapsing back. The monitor blipped, then fell flat. No response, doctor. Again, the surgeon barked. Sweat drenched his brow as he fought the impossible. The team was shaking, voices breaking under pressure. Doctor, he's not coming back. But the surgeon refused to give up. Not yet. Push another dose now. The syringe plunged in. The patient's lips turned bluish-gray. His eyelids fluttered faintly, as though he were trying to fight his way back from the darkness. Then, an unearthly sound rattled from his throat. A deep, wet gurgle. His body convulsed. The monitors flickered back to life. A weak pulse. Ragged breathing. He was back. But everyone in the room knew the truth. Something was terribly wrong. His body wasn't just failing, it was reacting. And when the surgeon glanced back at the open wound on his neck, he saw movement inside. A shiver ran down his spine. Doctor, a nurse whispered, voice breaking. Is there something alive in there? The surgeon didn't answer. His eyes stayed locked on the twitching mass within the wound. Whatever this man carried inside him, it wasn't finished yet. Before the sterile lights, before the screaming machines, before the lump consumed his body, he was just David Miller, a man with calloused hands and a gentle voice. A husband, a father. The memory begins on a Sunday morning. Sunlight streamed through the worn curtains of a modest home. David sat at the breakfast table, cradling a chipped coffee mug. Across from him, his wife, Anna, smiled while buttering toast. Their teenage daughter, Lily, was scribbling homework, hair tied messily in a bun. Dad, she teased, not looking up, you've got that farmer's tan again. You need to stop working in the yard without a hat. David chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck absent-mindedly, the very spot where the lump had silently started months earlier. Somebody has to keep this place standing, he said warmly. They laughed together, a picture of ordinary love. But behind his smile, David hid the faint ache beneath his skin, a bump that seemed harmless, not worth worrying anyone about. His wife, Anna, noticed him wince once. You okay? She asked softly, her eyes narrowing with concern. David quickly waved it off. Just stiff muscles. Comes with age. But the truth was different. The lump was growing, little by little, every day. He could feel it tightening when he bent over, tugging at his skin. At night, it throbbed like a heartbeat of its own. Still, he said nothing. Why? Because he was the rock of the family. The man who fixed the leaks, mowed the lawn, and made sure his daughter had a warm coat in winter, even if he had to go without. To admit weakness would mean admitting he wasn't invincible. And David Miller couldn't do that. Not when his family needed him strong. So he ignored it, day after day, smile after smile, until ignoring it nearly cost him everything. Back in the present, as his limp body lay beneath the surgeon's trembling hands, his wife sat in the waiting room clutching Lily's hand, whispering the same prayer over and over again. Please, God, don't take him from us. David Miller had always been stubborn, a man who fixed his own problems, whether it was a leaky pipe or a broken fence. So when the lump first appeared, he convinced himself it was nothing more than a swollen gland. At first, it was the size of a marble. He brushed it off, telling Anna it was just a knot from working too hard. But deep down, he knew something wasn't right. Weeks turned into months. The lump swelled, sometimes tender, sometimes eerily still. At night, Anna would catch him rubbing the back of his neck in discomfort. David, you need to see a doctor, she insisted. But he would always smile, kiss her forehead, and say, no sense in wasting money on doctors for something that'll go away on its own. The truth was fear. Fear of what they might find. Fear of being told he was sick. And even greater than that, the fear of leaving his family unprotected. His daughter noticed too. Dad, you don't look good. Please, just get it checked. Her voice cracked when she said it. Still, he refused. He carried the burden silently. The lump grew, pressing against nerves, sending fiery stabs of pain down his spine. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't work. And yet, he kept lying, telling everyone he was fine. Until one night, while lying in bed, the lump began to throb violently. His skin stretched, hot and inflamed. He stumbled to the bathroom mirror and peeled back his collar. The lump wasn't just big anymore. It was moving, That was the moment he knew he could no longer hide it. And that decision, to finally face the truth, brought him to the hospital bed where his life now hung by a thread. Back and index pointing right, one click from you equals endless motivation for me. Please subscribe. The operating room was dead silent, all eyes fixed on the open wound in David's neck. The surgeon leaned closer, his gloved hand steady but his breathing ragged. With a careful motion, he widened the incision. The lump split apart and something slid out. At first, it looked like tangled tissue, but then it writhed. One nurse screamed, stumbling back. It had moved. Oh my God, it's alive. Inside, the swelling were long, pale shapes twisting against one another. Worm-like, thick, squirming. The stench hit next, a sour, metallic rot that filled the room. A younger nurse gagged, ripping off her mask, barely making it to the sink before vomiting. The surgeon's eyes widened in horror. Parasites, he muttered. Dozens of them. The worms were embedded deep, feeding off his flesh. Every time the scalpel touched one, it writhed violently, as if protesting. Another nurse clutched the table, her knuckles white. How could he even live with this inside him? The suction machine roared as the surgeon began pulling them out, one after another. Each squirming, glistening parasite dropped into a metal tray with wet, sickening slaps. Scalpel. Clamp. Suction. He barked, sweat dripping into his mask. But the deeper he cut, the worse it became. There weren't just a few. There were dozens. Some dead, some alive, some nesting. By the time the fifth tray was filled, the staff could barely keep their composure. One nurse backed into the wall, shaking, whispering prayers under her breath. Then they saw it, the largest of them all, buried near his spine. The thing twitched grotesquely as the surgeon pulled it free, nearly a foot long. The room went silent. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved, because in that moment, every person in that room realized David Miller had been carrying a nightmare inside his body for years. And somehow, he was still alive. The question haunted everyone. How did this happen? The answer lay years earlier. David had been working long hours in construction. One summer, he cut the back of his neck on a rusty piece of rebar. He barely noticed it at the time, just wiped the blood with his shirt and kept going. The wound scabbed over, then healed. But deep inside, something had already taken root. Doctors later theorized it began with fly larvae. An open wound, poor hygiene at a work site, maybe even contaminated water. The larva burrowed, then grew. And when untreated, parasites thrived, multiplying silently beneath his skin. David ignored the early signs, the itching, the odd crawling sensation. He couldn't afford to miss work. He couldn't afford hospital bills. So he buried the truth. And the truth buried itself deeper into him. By the time the pain became unbearable, by the time his wife and daughter begged him to see a doctor, it was too late. The lump wasn't just a lump anymore. It was a colony. And tonight, in that blindingly lit operating room, the secret he had hidden for years finally came to light in the most horrifying way possible. News of the case spread like wildfire. By morning, local reporters swarmed the hospital entrance. Man infested with worms survives emergency surgery, one headline blared. Inside, the hospital board demanded answers. How could something like this go untreated for so long? Was it medical negligence? Authorities questioned the construction company. Had they forced him to work in unsafe conditions? Had they ignored his complaints? The whispers spread beyond the hospital walls. Some accused David of carelessness. Others blamed poverty, saying the system had failed him by making healthcare too expensive to access. A nurse, still shaken by what she had seen, told investigators, "I've worked here 20 years. I've seen car crashes, burns, gunshots. But this was something out of a nightmare. We weren't prepared for it." The legal noise grew louder. Lawyers talked of lawsuits. Activists spoke of better healthcare rights for workers. But while the world debated, David's wife sat by his bedside, holding his hand, whispering through tears, "Don't listen to them. Just come back to us. That's all that matters." Days passed. David hovered between life and death. His body was ravaged, scarred from surgery, weakened from the infestation. The doctors had done all they could. Now it was up to him. Anna never left his side. She read aloud to him, even when he couldn't respond. She placed Lily's school photos on the nightstand, hoping they'd remind him what he was fighting for. Then, one evening, as the machines hummed and the monitors beeped softly, his fingers twitched. "Doctor!" Anna cried, leaping to her feet. The medical team rushed in. His eyelids fluttered, then opened. Groggy, confused, but alive. Tears streamed down Anna's face. Lily clung to her mother, sobbing, "Dad, you're back." The surgeon entered quietly, his expression a mix of exhaustion and awe. "I don't know how you survived this," he admitted. "Most wouldn't have, but you did." David tried to speak, his voice raspy. "My girls." He turned his eyes toward his wife and daughter. "I couldn't leave them." The room fell silent. Doctors, nurses, family, all of them united in that fragile moment of human resilience. Against all odds, David Miller had survived the unthinkable. Back and index pointing right, please subscribe, because your one click is the biggest motivation for me. Weeks later, David walked slowly out of the hospital, arm in arm with Anna and Lily. His neck bore a scar, a permanent reminder of what nearly ended his life. But more than a scar, he carried a lesson. He faced the cameras once, speaking softly but firmly. "Don't ignore your body. Don't let fear or pride stop you from getting help." I thought I was protecting my family by staying strong. But the truth is, I almost left them with nothing. Anna squeezed his hand. Lily leaned against his shoulder. They had nearly lost everything. But now, they had each other, and that was enough. The story of David Miller spread across the world, not just as a medical horror, but as a warning. A man who carried a silent monster inside him, yet lived to tell the tale. And for those who listened, his suffering became a lesson. Your health is not a burden. It is a gift. Protect it. Cherish it. Because sometimes what hides beneath the surface can change everything. In the end, David's greatest strength wasn't ignoring the pain. It was surviving it and finding the courage to face the truth.